So welcome to the A&M Masterclass. This is what's called conversion chunks. And today I'm going to walk you through 21 bits of sales producing content chunks that you can use in any marketing campaign to extend the marketing campaign timeline, to lengthen the marketing campaign so that you have the chance for more conversions. And so the question or a question that I'm asked all the time is, how long should the marketing campaign be? Like, when this question that I get all the time is, when should I end the marketing campaign? Like, when is it time to stop the campaign and move on to another campaign? And the answer that I always give is, when you've got nothing new to say, when you've got nothing more to add to the conversation, when you've got no more value to give, and all you would be doing is just hammering the prospect over and over and over about the offer, or over and over and over about the benefits of the product or service, then it is time to move on. But what we want to do is we want to give ourselves the opportunity to continue marketing. We want to give ourselves the opportunity to bring something new to the table and continue to do that for as long as we can, so that we have a greater period of time to convert the prospect, right? Everything new that we have to say, or every new bit of content, every new bit of information that we can bring to the table that is of value and that potentially moves the prospect one step closer to buying, is a valuable thing to add to a marketing campaign. And so that's what these conversion chunks are all about. The objective of these conversion chunks, these blocks of information, these new bits of content that you can add to any marketing campaign, are there to extend the timeline of your marketing campaign, to take a 5-day marketing campaign and make it a 9-day marketing campaign, to take a 9-day marketing campaign and make it a 10-day or an 11-day or a 12-day, to take a 10-day and make it a 14-day, and so on. But do it in a way that adds value. Do it in a way that furthers the discussion. Do it in a way so that you're not simply hammering your prospects, but you are delivering more value. And we want to extend the timeline of your marketing campaign so that you can market longer, so that you can market harder, so that ultimately you produce more sales conversions. And so today in this training, I'm going to walk you through the 21 different chunks that you can add to any marketing campaign. Now, depending on your product or service, not every single one of these 21 will apply, right? If you are, let's say, marketing dental care, or you're an orthodontist, you might not be able to use all 21. You may only be able to use 18 of these 21. But if you had 18 new chunks, 18 new pieces of content that you can use, that you could add to a marketing campaign, you better believe that you're going to have the opportunity to make more money, generate more sales, acquire more customers, and so on. And so what I want you to do as we go through these 21 different chunks is, I want you to think about how you can apply them to your marketing campaign, how you can apply them, when can you apply them, where can you apply them to your existing marketing campaign. Now, before we dive in, I want you to understand that these chunks can be used, these additional conversion chunks can be used. You could add these simply as emails. These can become additional emails in your follow-up sequence. These can be disseminated as videos. So if you wanted to add an additional video or 2 videos to your marketing campaign, you could do that. If you wanted to do or add a Facebook Live or a webinar, a live stream, whatever it may be, or any combination of those. So I don't want you to think that you've got to do video, or you've got to do a webinar, or you've got to do, a VSL, or you've got to only do email. You can take these conversion chunks and you can disseminate them in a variety of different ways. And what I would encourage you to think about is, how can you take these different conversion chunks and use them, disseminate them, add them to your marketing campaign, and use different medium. So take one of these conversion chunks and you may add it as an email. You may take another one and add it as a simple video. You may take another one and it might be something that you do as a Facebook Live. You may do another one that is just a retargeting video, right? And you'll see that some of these are much easier to create, much quicker to create. Some of these are very straightforward. Others require a little bit more work and a little bit more thinking. But again, the aim is to take these conversion chunks and extend the timeline of your marketing campaign so that you can market longer, you can market harder, so that you ultimately produce more sales, more conversions, more new customers, and so on. And so with that being said, and if you've got any questions, I think that you're going to find that these are very straightforward. In fact, there's a handful of these that I've covered with you guys and gals in the past. You'll see how a lot of these I use and recycle on a regular basis in our own campaigns. And so I think that you're going to be very comfortable with these. And so with that being said, let's get to the first conversion chunk. First conversion chunk, very simple, very straightforward, and that is this. That is, tell your prospect the story of from failure to success. And what I mean by that in this context is, in essence, you're telling a hero's journey story of a prospect, of somebody from your marketplace, of somebody similar to the prospect. And so what you're doing is you're telling a story about an individual that, and in, of course, in an ideal universe, this is a real story. This isn't a made up story. This isn't, a fake story. This is a real story of either a customer or of somebody that you know of. You're telling a story of somebody just like the prospect that was in the same situation that the prospect is in right now. We call that failure, struggle, turmoil. The individual, the protagonist in the story is dealing with whatever hurdles, whatever obstacles, whatever problems your prospect is currently dealing with. And what the protagonist, the star of the story, did was they found your mechanism. They found your approach. They came across your approach in some way, shape, or form, whether it was accidental, whether somebody was introduced, and it doesn't even have to be your particular product. It can be your method, right? Like, for example, I could be talking to somebody about an individual that was struggling to pay their bills, and then they learned how to properly market on the internet. And then in the next year, they went on to earn $500,000, right? That's a failure to success story with the kind of the bridge that brought the person from failure to success being online marketing. Right? And then I could use that as a way to lead the prospect into talking about the best way to do online marketing, E5 method. And so an additional chunk that you can add in to a marketing campaign is to tell a story of failure to success. Now, you might have a story of failure to success in your main marketing message. That's okay. Your prospect can't hear enough about individuals that were in their same situation, individuals that they can identify with, that discovered the thing that you're talking about and have gone on to success. If you really wanted to boil down a hero's journey to this chunk, it's just that. They were struggling, they discovered your thing or the thing that you're talking about, and after they discovered that, they went on to become successful. And so share a story of failure to success. Now, you'll notice something. I just want to point something out here, that you'll notice as we go through the other 20 conversion chunks, you'll notice that that some are more logical. Some kind of are more logical arguments, whereas this first conversion chunk is a very emotional thing. We're telling a story about somebody that was in the prospect situation, dealing with the same prospect, same emotions as the prospect, same obstacles, and they discovered something that allowed them to go on to become successful, or it allowed them to go on to experience the transformation that the prospect wants right now, right? And so it's very emotional. We're not talking about the product benefits. We're not talking about the features. We're not talking about how the product works. We're not appealing to logic. We are leveraging a story to have an emotional impact. And so that is the first conversion chunk. The second conversion chunk is really your discovery story. And in this context, what we're talking about here is what was the impetus behind you discovering or developing the thing that you've been talking to them about? Your methodology, your approach, your unique mechanism, right? If you are a personal trainer, what was your discovery story? What led you to, it doesn't necessarily have to be what took you from being overweight to being thin. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about your failure to success story. I'm talking about your discovery story, discovering the mechanism, right? How did you discover, develop, stumble on the mechanism that you're sharing with them? Was it after years of research? Was it after study? Was it after lots of trial and error? Was it after you meeting a stranger on a park bench in the middle of Manhattan? Was it after being mentored by one of the greatest pole vaulters in the world? What is the discovery story behind the mechanism? And what this does is this kind of course, story is captivating in general, but what this does is this brings them along to the kind of the journey of where you were before, and then what had to go into discovering this thing that you're now offering them. And in an ideal world, the discovery story builds value or creates value around the thing. It demonstrates just how much work and energy and effort that it took for you to identify this mechanism that you're now passing on to them. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of the story. I can't remember for the life of me the name of the company. It's an old ad, but it's the story that I've shared with you guys and gals before about the cigar company. And they tell the story of how they went somewhere, whatever, Panama. They had to go through the jungle. They had to hide from and avoid guerrillas, militant guerrillas, in order to find this tobacco that they then had to smuggle out, and they were only able to get a limited amount of this, tobacco that now they turned into this limited run of cigars, right? And the story, in that case, the discovery story of the tobacco that really, and the tobacco in that story, that unique tobacco, that rare tobacco, that tobacco from the middle of the jungle, is the unique mechanism, if you will, behind why those cigars were so good, so fresh, so crisp, so strong. And that discovery story adds value. Exactly. You got it, JMC. That discovery story adds value to the thing. And so this is another piece of content, another conversion chunk that you can add into your campaign. Again, this doesn't have to be necessarily what I just want to be crystal clear about something. We're not necessarily talking about adding these things into your core marketing message. We're not talking about necessarily adding these things into the body of your marketing argument. I'm talking about new reasons to follow up, new reasons to communicate with your prospect, and then give them a call to action to go buy. And so that is conversion chunk number 2. Conversion chunk number 3 is struggling versus thriving. And this is really nothing more than the difference between folks in the marketplace that are struggling and folks in the marketplace that are thriving. So if you were selling to accountants, this is the difference between accountants that struggle and accountants that thrive. It's the difference between, if you're talking to dentists that struggle and dentists that thrive. If you're talking to people that are striving to lose weight, it's people that struggle with their weight and people that do really well, people that lose their weight and keep it off. It's people that trade stocks, that struggle to make money or struggle to have consistent wins, versus the people that just seem to knock it out of the park week in and week out, month in and month out. What is the difference between these two? What's the difference in mindset? What's the difference in the way they operate, right? Here, in this context, so that you understand, the difference that I am pointing out is always something that is related to the product or service that I'm selling. Right? So let me give you an example. If I was selling marketing for dentists, as an example, one of the things that I'm not going to talk about, for example, let's say that I found hypothetically that Most successful dentists are married and have families and make their family a priority. I'm not going to talk about that in this conversion chunk because it doesn't further the sale. It doesn't help me to lead them one step closer to buying. I may talk about how the struggling dentists, they confuse an expense with an investment, or an investment with an expense. The struggling ones are the ones that try to get new patients for free, whereas the thriving ones understand the value of advertising, right? Struggling folks don't understand front end and back end, whereas thriving understand the importance and the difference between the two, right? So I'm going to present a message that is of value, that's educational, that helps the prospect to see the difference between the folks that are struggling, in their marketplace and the ones that are thriving. And I am going to do it. I'm going to focus on things that help me lead them one step closer to the sale, right? I'm going to present things that ultimately at the end of this conversion chunk will allow me to say, and that's why enrolling in the E5 Masterclass is one of the smartest things that you can do, because it will ensure you've got front end. It will ensure you've got this. It will ensure you've got this. It will ensure you've got this, right? So in essence, I'm presenting an additional aspect of the marketing argument, and I'm just wrapping it in this struggling versus thriving chunk of content. And so hopefully that makes sense. That is conversion chunk number 3. Conversion chunk number 4 is probably the most common form of content that we use, that I would say the majority of marketers that understand, content using education, some form of education-based marketing, use as well. And you've heard me talk about this before. And this is explain what to do, not how to do it. So this is you're teaching them what to do, not how to do it. So this is valuable if there is if your framework, if your methodology, if you're teaching, let's say, for example, if you're a consultant, if you're a coach, if you sell any kind of information product or a program, book, and you've got a methodology, you've got a framework. Well, teaching them what to do, but not the nitty-gritty details of how to do it, opens you up to, at the end, be able to say to them that, right, like if you need help in actually implementing this, that's why I put together X, Y, Z. So it allows you to deliver value, because when you're explaining what to do, when you are telling them what to do, you can explain why, right? So you could say, these are the three things that you need to do to grow bigger tomatoes, right? You need to properly nourish the soil, right? And this is important because if your soil isn't properly nourished, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And your garden needs the right mixture of nutrients, of nitrogen, potassium, blah, blah, blah. And when you have the right balance of nutrients, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see your plants are going to grow faster. Your plants are going to be, darker and brighter in color, blah, 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 grow bigger, all that. See, that's an example of me explaining what to do, but never how to do it. In that little example, I didn't explain how do you properly nourish the soil. I also didn't explain how do you identify the right balance of nutrients for the soil. But I did explain what to do. So there's value in there. And that value, that delivery of what to do, allows me to explain why it's important, right? So understand what we're doing here. Like, really get this, because if you get this alone, this should change the way you really market, or refine the way that you market. And that is this, that when I'm explaining to somebody what to do, when I tell them, here, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. Everything that I say after that is under the heading of education. And so when I'm explaining why it's important to do what it is that I'm telling them to do, it's not being viewed as a sales message. It's not being filtered as me trying to sell them. It's me giving support for the education that I'm giving them. It's me kind of telling them what to do and then making sure that they understand why it's important. But really what it is serving to do is build up the value and importance of knowing how to do it, right? So the better I get at offering support, or the better you get at offering support for the what to do, the more it makes them want to know how to do it. Because, right? So you just saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, and do this. That's not where the value comes from. The value comes from you explaining why it's important, what they will experience if done right, and what they will experience if done wrong. Because what they'll experience, right, gives them the reason why, and the stronger that reason why, the more valuable the how-to is. And the only way to get the how-to is in your training program, in your info product, in your consulting, in your coaching, etc. And so this is very, very common, and it's easy to pull off when you understand what it is that I just explained. The thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to just tell them what to do without any reason why or how to do it, because then you've got really this empty message. Then it really feels like, then if your message is only, here's what to do, and you don't give them any reason why, you don't give them any support, and you don't tell them how to do it, it feels like all you're doing is teasing them, right? It feels like you're not really giving value, you're just teasing them, and it leaves prospects frustrated. The key is what to do and why, and not the how. And so, very, very simple. Now, the kind of cousin to this, if you will, or the sister to this, is conversion chunk number 5. And that's show them part of what to do, but not everything, right? So this is if you've got an extensive, let's say, again, if you're a coach, if you're a consultant, if you are, even if you're offering a service, if you offered lawn care, if you offered, home cleaning, right? Like you could still use education as part of your marketing. If you've got an extensive framework, you have the opportunity to talk in depth about a part of your framework, but just not the entire framework. And in this context, you could even show them part of what to do and how to do it while teasing the rest. So for example, right, just as an example, if I wanted to, in our marketing for E5, I could talk about the examination stage. And I could even take one of the tools that we teach in the E5 Masterclass, and I could even explain how to use it, why to use it, why it's important, why it's valuable, what it should mean for them when it comes to using it to do better marketing. But explain to them that this is one of 4 tools, right? So I could even start off by saying, I want to talk to you about the examination stage. It's one of the most important stages in all of the E5 method, the 5-stage protocol that we use. Now, there are 4 different tools that we use as part of the examination. I want to share with you the one most important of the 4 tools. It's called blah, blah, blah. Let me walk you through it. And I could go through the entire thing. I could show them what it is and how to use it, how it works, how to implement it, but it's only one piece of the overall framework. So even though I'm giving them, it's kind of like I'm giving them a complete piece of a much bigger puzzle, right? And I'm teasing the fact that there is a much bigger puzzle that you want to use while I'm giving them a complete picture of this one thing. So they, it's kind of like, let's say if we were doing stock trading, it's one thing to be able to tell somebody, let's say, to teach somebody how to get into a trade, but they still need to know how to get out of a trade, right? And so it's incomplete, even though you're giving them a complete picture of that one step. There are still 5 other steps that they need to understand in order to be able to execute the entire formula, the entire framework. So this is great because, again, you get to deliver value, you get to teach, you get to educate, and under that kind of heading of education, you get to explain why it's so valuable, and you even get to talk about the rest of the framework, the methodology, as being super valuable, giving them a taste of only one chunk or one piece of that overall framework. And so hopefully that makes sense. That's conversion chunk number 5. And then here is, and I've talked about these 3 the last two and this one, I believe, in our last masterclass. But this is this is kind of that cousin. This is that one cousin, one step removed, if you will, from the last two. And that's tell them what to do, but not the best way to do it. Right? So it's kind of like, I'll be honest with you, I very rarely use this. And so I very rarely use this because it just feels weird to me to spend time teaching somebody something and then be like, this isn't the best way to do it. But the only time that I use this chunk is when I'll talk to them about speed. Like if you're willing to do something, if you really want speed and you're more concerned with speed over success or impact, let me show you a way that you can do X, Y, Z. Again, this isn't the best way, but this is a way that will allow you to get, average results fairly quickly, right? And so you're telling them what to do, but not the best way to do it. So you really just got to put your thinking cap on as it relates to what it is that you're teaching. Another great use of this is if you sell a service or a software. Let's say you sell a software, for example. Well, teaching them what to do, teaching them how to do what your software does, but teaching them how to do it manually is a great example of tell them what to do, not the best way, right? So you could tell them, like, you want to get, top search engine rankings. Here are the 7 steps that you need to do. Set up your blog the right way, blah, 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 keywords, blah, 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 backlinks, all that. You could walk them through. And then you explain that's a way that you can do it. It's not the best way. The best way uses automation or what we call blah, 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 artificial intelligence. Let me explain how that works and why it is better and blah, blah, blah. And that's why I spent the last year putting together this software. Da, 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 da. Right? And so you tell them what to do, but it's not the best way. And then you introduce them to the best way. Of course, the best way in this context is your method or your product or service. Conversion chunk number 7 is also does not apply to everybody, but this is where you actually show them how to do things. You can explain to them what to do, even how to do it, but the things that you're explaining how to do, they need to know more. They need to understand more in order to do it correctly. So a great example of this that I've talked about before is when many moons ago, when I was selling an expensive training program to chiropractors. Really, the interesting thing was that I showed them, I explained what they needed to do. I even explained how they needed to do certain things, like you got to go, register a domain name. You want to set up hosting. I actually, as part of the marketing, I brought them over to an example host. Excuse me, and I actually walked them through how to do this, but I did not walk them through exactly how to install WordPress on their server. I didn't explain to them how to install the plugins. I showed them where to find the plugins. Like I explained the plugins. I explained what the plugins would do, right? I walked them through it. And so I walked them through the detail, but I knew that there was more instruction that they would need to actually be able to execute. So really, behind the scenes, what we're talking about here is you being able to deliver value, you being able to teach, you being able to educate, you telling them what to do, you telling them how to do certain things, knowing that they're going to need more information from you, more guidance from you, more instruction, maybe even more hand-holding, right? This kind of thing is great if you offer a service, if you offer done for you, if you offer a very deep, intensive information product or training program, something like that. This is a great conversion chunk because all it does is create more demand for the thing that you're selling, right? If they need to know more to do it correctly, and the only place that they can get that more is through your product or service, all this does is build more demand for your product or service, right? It makes them want your product or service more, because as you're explaining to them what to do and how to do it, even the things that they need to know more to do correctly, you're again explaining why it's important. You're explaining and teaching them the payoff, the benefit. You're explaining to them and teaching them when they do this, the mistakes that they'll avoid and the ramifications of those mistakes that they'll never have to experience. And so you're building value around being able to do this correctly. And again, in this context, they won't necessarily understand how stealth this really is and how deep psychologically this really runs. Most prospects, they're gonna feel like they need to know more to do it correctly, but they're not gonna put that on you. They're gonna think that could be an individual thing. They're gonna think to themselves, this sounds great. I understand why. I love how deep he or she is explaining this to me, but I need to know more in order to do this correctly. They're going to think that it's themselves, it's them that need more. They're not going to say, oh, you left something out, right? They're going to look at it as they personally need more help. Maybe others don't, but they do, and it makes doing it correctly that much more valuable, and so it sets up the sale of your product or service. And so that is conversion chunk number 7. Conversion chunk number 8 is you explaining why the common approach is not the best, right? And so this is where you've got the opportunity. It does not matter what you are offering. If you're offering a service, if you're offering a software, if you're offering consulting or coaching or an information product, or even if you sell a physical product, and let's say you sell you sell backpacks, and the way that your backpack is assembled is very different from the typical commoditized backpack that they could get at Target or something like that, or Macy's, whatever it is. Well, you have the opportunity to explain. You're, in essence, right, you are pointing out the flaws in the common approach. Right? And so you're not pointing out necessarily, we're not talking about you pointing out flaws in competitors. We're not talking about you talking negatively about a competitor. We're talking about you highlighting and educating the prospect on the pitfalls of the common approach, right? So this could be, this could be the you name it. This could be the personal trainer pointing out the flaw in a ketogenic diet, or the flaws in a ketogenic diet, or flaws in intermittent fasting, or whatever it may be. They might take the top 3 or 4 diets that they're competing with, and they might just explain the pitfalls of those different approaches. See, by pointing out the pitfalls or the negatives of those common approaches, what it does is it creates demand for a different way. It creates a demand for an alternative solution. That alternative solution is your solution, right? And all you're doing here is equipping the prospect to understand both logically and emotionally why they don't want to go with the common approach. See, if you present your marketing message and you're presenting your diet program, let's say you're a personal trainer, you're a nutritionist, and you're presenting your diet program, and you're presenting it to folks that obviously, let's say, want to lose weight, want to get in shape, and they don't buy. Well, in their mind, right, the typical prospect is going to go somewhere else. The typical prospect is thinking there's another route, another method, another solution, another path that they can take to lose weight. This conversion chunk, addresses that other path that they're considering and thinking about is not the right way to go, and why. And that's the key, and why. The and why is the education-based marketing. If all you did was say it's not the right path and you didn't tell them the why, right? That's not education. That's simply just selling. That's you trying to convince them of something just because you're saying it. It's the and why that becomes the education, right? And so you're teaching them. I want you to think about this. You are opening their eyes. You're enlightening them to why the other approaches, the other methods, the other solutions, the other mechanisms that you are competing with, or that they see and believe that you are competing with, why those are not the best. And you're teaching them. You are educating them. And certainly, look, if you really want to get super savvy here, if you can show them how the common approach not only comes with a bunch of negatives, but also comes with the exact negatives that they don't want, right? Like if there are things that the prospect is trying to avoid, if there are things that the prospect is trying to stay away from, if there are things that the prospect is trying to move away from that they want less of in their life, and you could show them how these common methods actually will cause them to experience those things that they don't want to experience, that's even more powerful. But here you are simply teaching them why the common approach or approaches are not the best. Next, conversion chunk number 9, highlight the mistakes that they're making. Now this might seem similar to this, but this conversion chunk is you educating on the common methods, right? The common approaches. So the common, like the industry accepted methods that most people have accepted. So if you were talking to bodybuilders, for example, about growing more muscle, you would be addressing the common training methods that most average bodybuilders use. Over here, in conversion chunk number 9, you're highlighting the mistakes that the typical prospect is making, right? So this is the typical mistakes that the average prospect is making. So whereas this is more specific to a particular protocol or approach or method, right? This is specific to what are the mistakes that the typical prospect is making. What are the ramifications of those mistakes? And then really, right, you want to highlight how your method, your product, your service, your solution helps them to stop making those mistakes, right? So we're always pointing out mistakes here that our product or service fixes, that our product or service will help them overcome. So, right, so if it's, one of the mistakes, let's say we're talking about bodybuilders again, that they are not getting enough protein. Well, your method, right, we would mention that only if your method addresses that. If they weren't, if your method, if one of the mistakes is training too light, weights are too light, your method addresses that. If it's training, too often, not allowing for enough rest and recovery, well, your method needs to address that. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, these are mistakes and why. And these are the ramifications. This is why, if you do this, you won't grow muscle. If you do this, you won't recover. Therefore, you'll overtrain. You'll get tired. If you don't do this, you'll expose yourself to injury, which means you'll wind up blah, 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 right? And so we're painting this gruesome picture. That's why the blah, blah, blah method is so powerful, because it ensures you get enough protein so that you do build muscle. It ensures that you are training heavy enough so that you can stimulate muscular growth every time you're in the gym. It ensures that you get enough recovery so that you don't get tired, you don't expose yourself to injury, and so that you can continue to grow. And ultimately it blah, 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 blah. See how this one little chunk, this one little piece of content, which can be an email, can be a video, can be a Facebook Live, can be an extra webinar, right? That you like, look, I want you to look at this for 1 second, right? You could take this topic right here, the mistakes that they're making, right? And if we were, again, just going with this example of bodybuilders, this could be an extra webinar that we attach to the back of any marketing campaign. If they haven't bought after 2 days of seeing the offer, that just gives us another opportunity to market, to educate, and to ultimately present the offer again. And this could just be the 6 mistakes the 6 mistakes the average bodybuilder makes that holds them back from ever getting big. Right? And so see how it's another chunk of content that leads to the sale, because it gives you another opportunity to educate, to create demand, and to present the offer. And so that is conversion chunk number 9. Conversion chunk number 10 is tell them what not to do and why. And so this is, right? So this is also very similar to this. Let's just call it the sister of this. This one is highlight the mistakes that they're making. This one is tell them what not to do. And tell them why, right? So this is kind of like the way that I want you to think about this, the way that I approach this is think of the opposite of what it is that you would have them do as part of your, let's say, if you're a consultant, if you're a coach, if you're a trainer, if you run a live event, if you've got a service that you offer, what is it that you would tell them to do, right? And why? And then I just want you to think about what's the opposite of that, right? Like, what is the opposite of that? So, like, let's say, you could look at, let's say, the big idea, for example, and we always talk about, like, you don't want to scream a louder promise, right? That's working less and less, right? And so you want to instead use you want to use a big idea, blah, blah, blah. And so one of the things not to do is you don't want to attempt to get attention by screaming a louder promise, right? What not to do. You don't want to have a marketing message that is void of any logic, that is all emotion. And the reason why is blah, blah, blah. And so what I would be doing is I would be presenting the opposite of everything that I ultimately would teach or give them it with my method, because, right, telling them what not to do and why, and again, I just want to stress the why not to do it is the important part, right? Because the why not to do it is we want to show them, and let me just take a drink. Because, excuse me, what I want you to think about here is we tell them what not to do and why. The why not to do it is the ramifications, the result, right? Or lack of result. We want to show them that the results that they are either experience, the negative results, the problems, the obstacles, the issues, the struggle that they are experiencing is because they are likely doing one of these things that we're telling them not to do. And the way that we can resolve that is, right, like with your method. Right? So you don't scream a louder promise. You don't have a pure emotional message. If you want to stand out, if you want to get attention, if you want to lead people to buy in a cool way that delivers value, instead of screaming a louder promise, you want a big idea. Instead of having just a pure sales message that's emotional, you want a mix of logic and emotion. And that's why I put together the E5 method, because it does just that for you. It blah, 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 blah. Right? And so we're telling them what not to do and why not to do it, which is the opposite of what it is that we're teaching, so that we can contrast all the negatives of all the things that they shouldn't be doing against all the positives associated with what they should be doing, which is our method. That is conversion chunk number 10. Conversion chunk number 11 is equip them to spot bogus information. This is also one that I rarely use. This is basically about you teaching them how to spot bad advice, bad experts, bad, guides, leaders, gurus in the marketplace, whatever you want to call it. This is you helping them to understand what is information that they shouldn't be listening to, they shouldn't be following. A great example of this, or a simple example of this is typically much more appropriate when you are offering something that, when you're offering information or a system that is complex, when there is a lot of steps, and or a series of steps, a lot involved. Like, let's say, trading options in the stock market. So, an example of this is, let's say, I'm just going to give you an example. There are five pieces of advice, or five stances that you never want to follow when it comes to options. Number one is anybody that tells you to be on the buying side of options. Well, the reason why you don't want to be on the buying side and you want to be on the selling side is because of blah, 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 right? And so you're equipping them to be able to spot bogus information. Of course, everything that you are telling them about what is bogus information or what is kind of advice and guidance that you shouldn't listen to should be the polar opposite of what you do, right? So you may say, like, look, You certainly, number one, you don't want to listen to anybody that has only been successful in one business. I'm giving you, let's say I was talking to you about, spotting bogus information from, marketing experts, business experts. And let's say I was saying you never want to take advice or listen to somebody that's only been in one business. And the reason why is because each business and each vertical has different, dynamics, different markets, blah, 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 blah. As well, you don't want to take advice or guidance from anybody that's been in business less than 3 years. And the reason why is because they haven't been through recessions. They haven't been in business long enough to have the ups and downs and survive. You want to be with somebody that's been in business for at least 7 years or more and has been in at least two businesses or more, vastly different markets. And the reason why is blah, 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 blah. Of course, you want to make sure that you meet the criteria for what they should be listening to. And right, you want that bogus information, obviously, to be either your competitors, right, or the opposite of what you bring to the table. This one you've heard me talk about before. This is conversion chunk number 12. Dirty little secrets. These are kind of like the things that this is like what the marketplace, the gurus, the experts don't want you to know, right? And so this is kind of like, right, if you are like, look, if you're selling a software product, this could be what the mainstream software providers don't want you to know about this Google algorithm, don't want you to know about the way search really works, don't want you to know about XYZ. This could be if you're selling any kind of information product or training program. This could be, like what the pros, what they don't tell you as it relates to, like what the pros don't tell you as it relates to using a tripwire offer. Truth is that the tripwire offer, you can get a higher conversion rate, but it requires that you have a bump offer and at least 2 upsells that each convert well, meaning you have to have 4 offers that convert really well. This is one of those dirty little secrets that nobody tells you. They make it seem easy, but blah, 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 right? I'm just using that as an example. Point is, this is the kind of the secrets of the marketplace, the secrets that the other providers don't want you to know. And here, what we are trying to do is, obviously, we're using this not just as a way, and this I want you to get, because what I'm about to say applies to every single conversion chunk, right? We're not simply educating for the sake of educating. We're not simply just coming up with some dirty little secret that we believe the market has just so that we can tell them about a dirty little secret. Remember, you've heard me say this before. Everything that we do and say and show and present in your marketing campaign, whether it's part of the core, the initial sales and marketing page, the VSL, the initial webinar, whatever it may be, or it's these additional conversion chunks that get added on after, everything that we do and say and show and present should be there to further the sale, should be there to create more demand for your thing. So if we're going to tell a dirty little secret that exists in the marketplace, a dirty little secret that the experts, the gurus don't want you to know, it should be something that is polar opposite to what it is that we are offering, right? They don't want you to know that the way the typical software works, it can get you blacklisted by Facebook. Well, that's why we took a year and a half to make sure that we got Facebook approval so that you don't blah, 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 blah. Right? And see how we're giving away a dirty little secret that makes our solution, our product, our service that much more valuable. We're not simply just giving a dirty little secret. It's there for a purpose. It's there to make our thing that much more desirable. And so that is conversion chunk number 12. Conversion chunk number 13 is similar to an earlier one. Here we're contrasting your mechanism versus the others. Right? So here is, we're taking your unique mechanism, the mechanism behind your product or service, and you are contrasting your mechanism against the other mechanisms. So we're not talking about, and this is important, we're not talking about here your product against others. Because, right, I'm not a believer at all in bad-mouthing a competitor's product. Right? I am not a believer in that at all. I do not recommend you do that at all. But this gives you the ability to talk about your mechanism compared to other mechanisms, right? So if I wanted to, let's say, compare, I don't know, let's say, for example, I was teaching, let's say I was offering fertilizer that had, a 10-10-10 mix of the three core nutrients. And most other fertilizers had a 10-5-8 or something, or 10-5-5. I have no idea what that means. I'm just using that as an example. Right? Well, I would explain what happens when you go with a 10-5-5. I wouldn't name the product. I would name the companies that use the 10-5-5, but I would explain the negatives, the downside of using a 10-5-5 versus the positives of using a 10-10-10. So in essence, you're highlighting all the positives of your mechanism and you are highlighting all the negatives of the others, right? And you might not, you might pick one thing, right? Like, understand, this could be an email. You could pick one negative, so you don't have to highlight all the negatives of the other mechanisms and all the positives of yours. You could pick one. What is the one kind of contrasting element between your mechanism and the others out there that would be most meaningful to your prospect, that your prospect would care about the most? Well, it gives you the ability to highlight that, right? Like, if you were marketing and selling a fertilizer, you could literally send out an email that's just like, most homeowners make the mistake of using a fertilizer with a 10-5-5 nutrient ratio. This can cause you massive headaches. What are the headaches? Blah, 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 blah. That's why you want a 10-10-10 mixture. Because here is, right? And then we would give the benefit of that. That's why we invested the time, energy, and effort in making sure that, the brown fertilizer has a 10-10 mixture, so that right? So it's a valuable piece of information, but it's you contrasting your mechanism against the others. You taking one negative of the others and showing the reverse, or the positive that they get from your mechanism. This is a very, very powerful, tool that I use regularly in our marketing campaigns. Conversion chunk number 14. Explain why now is the perfect time to act. Right? So why is now the perfect time for them to take action? This is one of those that might not apply to everybody's business, to everybody's product or service, but this is a very powerful conversion chunk, because your prospects need a reason to respond now. They need a reason to respond. You need to give them the reasoning to respond now. Now, a lot of marketers, a lot of entrepreneurs default to things like a deadline, things like scarcity, things like urgency, right? All of those type of things. And those are okay, right? Those are good. Those are valuable in a marketing campaign. What I'm talking about here is, why is now the perfect time for them to act? Is something happening in the economy? Is something happening in the environment? Is something happening in terms of the time of year? Is now the perfect time for them to get started on their nutrition and fitness program, because we're still 3 months away from summer, and so they have the opportunity, it's the opportune time to get started. Whereas if they wait a handful of weeks, they're going to be behind the 8 ball and getting in shape for the summer. Is now the perfect time to start your business, because legislation is coming that's going to change the costs or the legalities of taxes, the tax implications for a business? Why is now the opportune time or the perfect time to act? When you can find this, right, this is an extremely valuable conversion chunk. Really, this is a valuable conversion chunk that should be in your core marketing message, as well as can be shared in a conversion chunk. Why is now the right time, the perfect time, the best time for them to act? That's conversion chunk number 14. Conversion chunk number 15. Tell your prospect what your product or method is not, right? And here, this is very simple. What are all of the things that your prospect does not want from your type of product or service, right? What are the attributes of your type of product or service that are a deal killer for the prospect? What are the attributes of your type of product or service that the prospect would see as a negative, that they would like to avoid? What are the aspects of using and engaging with your type of product or service that the prospect would see as a negative? You want to list those out during your examination stage, right? When you're doing all of your research, because ideally you want to describe your method as not being the things that your prospect doesn't want, right? So if you're marketing to, let's say, folks that you are marketing and selling a marketing system to, like, actually, let me take a step back. Many moons ago, when I used to sell a business development program to massage therapists, I knew that they didn't like sales. They really, as crazy as it sounds, most massage therapists are not capitalists. They don't like asking for money. They're very kind of impact driven. They don't want to come across as aggressive. They don't like selling. And so I presented our methodology as a way to grow your business without having to be aggressive, without having to be obnoxious, without having to sell hardcore. Now, granted, right, I personally don't like selling. I don't like that. So it was easy for me to do that. But I knew that that's what it is that they didn't want. So it's kind of like identify what your prospects don't want in your type of product and then tell them that your product doesn't have those things. Assuming, of course, that that's the truth. Right? So whatever it is that your prospect doesn't want, that your product doesn't have, that your product doesn't force them to do, whatever negative, right, they're trying to avoid, tell them that your product, service, using it doesn't require any of that. And so that is conversion chunk number 15. Conversion chunk number 16 is show them a day in the life of a transformed customer. Right? So now what you're going to see in the rest of the remaining few conversion chunks, now you're going to see these are more appropriate for the end of your marketing campaign. This is kind of like these. Now you're going to see that now we're moving into kind of more selling. Very early on, we were telling a story about from failure to success, your discovery story. We were teaching them what to do and not how to do it and teasing a little bit. And right, we were using kind of more education-based marketing. Now we're moving into conversion chunks that are really kind of closer or getting closer and closer to selling, to talking about the product, to getting a little bit more aggressive in what it is that you're doing. So here we're showing them a day in the life of a transformed customer. I call it a transformed customer, not necessarily a successful customer, because this is about, right, what is what is life like for the typical customer that takes or uses your product or service and is now experiencing the outcome, the result, the impact, the change, the transformation that they wanted, the same transformation outcome result that your current prospect wants to experience, right? And so we're sharing what is that like. So if you're marketing, right, to orthodontists that want to try to build a steady flow of leads, well, you're gonna paint a picture of your transformed customer that's an orthodontist that has steady leads and what that looks like and what that means for them and how their business is growing and how their staff is more motivated and how the waiting room is bustling and how they're becoming known as a celebrity, right? More and more, like, and how they come in at 10 o'clock, they leave at 4, they're doubling their income. You're showing them a day in the life of a transformed customer. As a side note, this is whenever I do a multi-step, video campaign. If I use a 3-part or a 4-part video sequence, if I do a live launch or an evergreen kind of style launch, this is almost always the third video, the one video right before the offer video. And so this day in the life of a transformed customer. This is kind of like now you are in essence painting a picture, painting a movie for the prospect of what life will look like for them after they use your product or service. And you're doing it by showing them what the typical customer experience is now, which is exactly what it is that your prospect should want to experience. Conversion chunk number 17 is very simple. It's customer case study. So this is now similar to it's similar to the failure to success story from earlier, except here you are representing, you're presenting this person as a customer, as a user of your product or service. Mary Jane purchased LMNOP 3 months ago, Before that, she was struggling to do blah, 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 blah. She was miserable. She didn't like her garden, right? She took my training course, and 1 week later, here's what she said, blah, 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 right? And now I'm growing bigger tomato. And so you are presenting this as a customer case study. See how this is more aggressive than just a failure to success story? Because now we're talking about your customers. We're talking about your product, and we're talking about the results, the impact that your product has on your customers, specifically people that buy. So earlier we were talking about a failure to success story, which was there to just motivate and excite the prospect about what they could expect to experience, right? Like what life could be like for them. This now is what life is like for a customer, a buyer of your product or service. And this is one of those, once you are coming to the end of your marketing campaign, relatively, you can't have enough customer case studies, because this serves as proof, especially when your case study, when your customer was in the same position as your prospect is currently in, or when the case study person was in a worse situation, when they were even more handicapped, they had more struggles, they had more obstacles, they had more issues, right? They were starting out in a worse off situation than your prospect. They came across your product, they bought your product, and now the life that they're living is the exact life that your prospect wishes that they could live. That is a great case study. You could never have enough of those, especially when they are diverse, and especially when the customer started off in the same or worse situation as your prospect, because it makes them feel like if that person could do it and all of those people can do it, then I can do it. And so that is conversion chunk number 17. Conversion chunk number 18 is simple. Answer frequently asked questions, right? This is an opportunity for you to answer any questions that folks may have. This could be, some of these could be you might want to do things like load the questions here. And what I mean by that is one of the questions might be, can I really get my money back? Yes, right? Because it allows you to focus on and highlight a benefit that, yes, you can get your money back. All it takes is an email. You've got the next month to try it out. You either love it or you get a complete refund, so you risk nothing. Another question might be, how fast can I expect to see results, or can I really expect to see results in 1 week, right? And so simply answer frequently asked questions. The next one is very similar, a cousin to that, conversion chunk number 19, which is address and overcome objections, right? And so if there is a strong objection that you have, you certainly hopefully have covered all the objections in your core message, right? We typically will do things, we do NPTSM, need, procrastination, time, spouse, and money. Those are typical, the common foundational objections. But then there could be additional objections that you also addressed in your core message, how much money will it take? How much time will it take? Does it need any special software? Do I need any special skills? Do I need any connections? Do I need to understand XYZ? Will I need to buy a special computer, right? There could be a whole bunch of objections that folks have. Well, you can pull out one or two of the most powerful, the strongest objections, and cover them additionally in an extra conversion chunk. Just because you cover your objections during the core of your marketing message absolutely positively does not mean that you shouldn't bring it up again as part of a conversion chunk, right? Oftentimes, I'll tell you, the bulk of the follow-up for a marketing campaign comes from all of the benefits and proof within the body of the marketing argument. So often the bulk of the follow-up is taking pieces of the marketing message and delivering it, right? Odds are that you've covered the objections, hopefully all the objections in the core marketing message. Here we're pulling out one or two, and we are overcoming them. We're overcoming and eliminating those objections. Oftentimes you could do this simultaneously. You could do it within a frequently asked question. Like An objection might be, do I need to be tech savvy, right? Or I'm afraid I need to be tech savvy and I'm not tech savvy enough for this, right? And so you could ask that question and answer that question to overcome the objection. And so you could do multiple objections in a single piece of content, or you could do one objection in a single piece of content. Your aim, of course, is to use this kind of chunk to wipe out any reason that would stand in the way of your prospect buying. So any and all potential objections or obstacles to your prospect buying, we want to wipe away. Conversion chunk number 20. We're coming down to the last two here. Number 20 is reframe a lingering negative. Now, this is really a bit of an advanced tactic, but this is reframing a lingering negative. So, number one, let me give you a simple example. So, showing your prospect that something is an investment versus an expense is reframing it. Right? You're reframing what they view as a negative, like this is an expense. I don't want another monthly expense. I'm trying to trim down my expenses. And you reframe it as, of course, I want you to trim down your expenses. I want you to be able to wipe out your expenses. And one of the best ways to do that is to be able to make more money. And as high income earners know, proper investments that give you a phenomenal ROI is the way to make more money to pay down your debt. Well, that's what this is. This is an investment into your future that's going to bring you a positive ROI, blah, blah, blah. So you are reframing something that is a potential lingering negative. You're reframing it as a positive. A great example, a really good example that I've talked about for years is from the days that I used to work in the health club industry. And so many, many moons ago, I worked in the health club industry, and I worked for a health club that was had an unbelievable sales staff. And one of the sales staff was trained out the wazoo, like they had a scripted presentation. They knew when to ask certain questions at one part of the tour, like unbelievable. This health club company over multiple locations did thousands of new members every single month. And at one part of on one part of the tour, when they were touring prospective members around the facility, they would always say something like, now, because we are higher priced than most of the local clubs, we keep the riffraff out. So you don't hear a lot of grunting, you don't see a lot of muscle heads throwing weights around, and it ensures that you never have to wait for equipment. So you're able to get in and out. And, I'm sure that that's something that you want to do rather than having to wait around for equipment. So what the salespeople did was they reframed a lingering negative, a potential negative, in this context, higher prices than our competition. They reframed that negative as a positive. That it's a good thing. You should be glad that we have higher prices because you won't have to interact with muscle heads. Stuff won't get dirty. People won't leave their weights around, and we prevent overcrowding. So you'll never have to wait for equipment, so you can get in and out. Now that potential negative is a positive. Now the prospect looked at cheap clubs as, oh, I'm sure they're super crowded. I'm sure that they are. I'm sure that they're crazy busy, and I'm sure that I'm going to have to wait for equipment. Reframing is critical because, right, it's this idea of, you want to make sure that you control the frame because whoever controls the frame wins. It's why you see a lot of frame control in politics when, they change something from, let's say, pro-abortion to really pro-choice, changing the what you call it, right? They changed it from pro-abortion. We don't want anybody to think that we're pro-abortion. We're pro-choice, right? And so that's changing or controlling the frame. And so you want to take any potential negatives, like what is it that they see as a negative, and you want to reframe it. Another example of this is, let's say it is difficult. Let's say you're selling something that's somewhat difficult to implement, right? You're selling a business development or sales course or something like that, and it's difficult to implement, or it's a bit time consuming. Well, you could present it as it is time consuming, and that's a good thing for you because it weeds out a lot of competitors that just are not willing to do the work. And so you don't have to worry about people coming in and knocking off what it is that you're doing. In fact, the reality is that because it is difficult, that serves as a competitive advantage to you, knowing that most others aren't going to be willing to do the work. If it was easy, your stuff would be knocked off very quickly and it would become worthless right away. Here, you never have to worry about that, right? So you're reframing this negative of something being difficult as something positive, that being that it's difficult, it gives the person, it gives the prospect a long-term competitive advantage. Finally, conversion chunk 21, our last one, is remind your prospect of what they'll miss out on if they fail to act. What do they stand to lose, right, if they fail to act? And really here, what I would say is this: remind them of what they're going to miss out on and remind them of the consequences. So what they'll miss out on are all the benefits, right, is all the upside. But you want to remind them also of what is it that they will experience? What are the negatives? What's the ramifications, right, that they'll experience? If you're talking to somebody about weight loss, one of the ramifications, right, is health-related stuff, joint problems, potentially diabetes, cardiovascular disease, an increased risk of cancer, less energy, probably lower self-esteem, right? Those are the things that they will experience if they fail to act, right? And if they act today, they can experience this, And wouldn't it be a shame to miss out on getting your health under control, avoiding diabetes, more confidence, blah, blah, blah. So you're reminding them of what they'll miss out on if they fail to act, and you're reminding them of the ramifications if they fail to act. This is another one of those emotionally charged pieces of conversion content or sales producing content that works really well. Never let your prospect forget what is on the line. Never let your prospect forget what it is that you're talking about here, what it is that they have to experience or avoid. And so there you go, 21 conversion chunks. Here's what it is that I recommend that you do now, and that is take action. There's no value in any of this or any of these conversion chunks if you don't take action on them. Like I said at the beginning of our training, I was going to give you 21, and no doubt there are probably 2, 3, maybe 4, maybe 5, maybe even 6 of these that don't apply to your business. But even if there are 6 that don't apply, that means there are 15 additional pieces of content or conversion chunks that you can use, that you can add to any marketing campaign to extend that timeline, to market more, to market longer, to market harder, to produce more conversions. And so now I want you to take action. I want you to decide which of the conversion chunks you're going to use, where in your marketing campaign you're going to use each of those conversion chunks, and when are you going to get each published and live. So decide which of the 21 conversion chunks you're going to use, where you're going to use each one of those in your campaign, and really also how. Is it going to be an email? Is it going to be a Facebook Live? Is it going to be a webinar? Is it going to be a video? Is it going to be an ugly video? Is it going to be an on-camera video? Is it going to be an iPhone video? Is it going to be a retargeting video? What's it going to be? And then where on your calendar are you going to schedule it to get each of those conversion chunks published and live? Remember, you don't have to publish all of them at the same time. You can do one at a time, but I want you to plan it out. This is how I think about extending the life, the timeline, the impact of a marketing campaign. Now you understand, right, that as long as you have something of additional value that you can offer, that you can give, that you can share with your prospects, you can continue to market to them. The key is that what we're sharing, what we're teaching, what we're giving, these additional conversion chunks are value that move the prospect closer to buy, value that build more demand for your product or service. And so there you have it, conversion chunks, 21 bits of sales producing content that you can use in any of your marketing campaigns.